Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. Uh, so today I'll be talking about some of the tips around optimizing Visualforce performance, as you can see from the screen itself. Um, like I always say, right? I'm not a big fan of putting this stuff in the slide, right? I mean, it's no point. I'm copy pasting this information from here to the slide. It's just a waste of my time. Okay. So when you are building a Visual Force perform page or a component or for that matter LWC, you have to always consider performance into consideration because it's very important. It's not like you just write a piece of a code and with an assumption that it will scale. When it has to scale, it will handle large data volume, or it will not slow down based on data fetch. So you have to factor all of this into consideration. It's very important from a uh, software development perspective, right? Um, and that's equally applicable to Visual Force pages, right? Since we are specifically talking about Visual Force page. Now, why you should know this thing? Because you might have an existing Visual Force application, and when you do, right, at times you might get an request saying, "Oh, this page is extremely slow. This page has this issue. This page has that issue." Right. So these things will help you identify the issues. Right. Okay. You can say, "All right, check number one. Um, are we using, say, for instance, right SOCL expression? Right? Are we using where clause to it? Is it filtering based on the requirement, or are you just getting a large pile of data? Right? So let's go through one by one, right? So it will be easier. Okay, the first of all, design your visual force page, right? So if you are someone who ever heard about model view controller concept, right? Whether you have model, which normally used for the data layer, view, it just where it's just like a UI, and a controller which gets the request, right? Which gets the data from the model and displays the view. So you should never write your business logic in the view, right? That's the first thing. That same goes to the visual force page. You should not make your Visual Force page garbage while writing your functional and business process inside the Visual Force page. That has to be done outside it, right? Um, and also, another thing I just wanted to mention that usually it's a very normal scenario. The place where I used to work a long time ago, the sales guy comes in always making uh, opinion, right? The sales guys always have an opinion. Oh, I want this stuff to be done in this way, right? So that I can sell the product. I want this stuff to be done in that way. So sometimes, most of the time, salespeople are not technical. So I mean, although they have the best intention, right, to launch the product into the market and to sell and make as much money for the company, but they fail to understand the technical implication. They're saying, "Oh, okay, Visual Force page. All right, why don't we add the business functionality there? Why don't we have a business functionality there?" So if you're a technical person, if you're a technical architect, you have to take a step back and tell to the guy, look, I agree that certain features needs to be implemented, but let us implement it in our own way, right? You worry about the sales stuff, and worry about the technical implementation perspective. So you have to understand what are you trying to build, and the scalability, how it's going to scale over the course of time, and what happens when the data volume is huge, right? So that's and it's always good to build a proof of concept, right? That's one of the way you can validate whether your concept's really going to work in real life scenario, right? So that's one of the guidelines. Excuse me. Now, another thing is the standard object and declarative functions, which is pretty simple. Always try to use out of box functionality. You should not be, jumping into the code when you think that you can do this using a standard out of box functionality, then you shouldn't be going to custom route. The custom route should be the last option. Okay, so if things can be achieved using standard objects or using a declarative option, then you should stick to that. That's always my suggestion. Okay, limit the amount of data. This is what I've talked about. So limit the amount of data. It always depends upon your SQL query. Say, for instance, like select name from an account. And if you wanted to use that query, that's a very bad query, because you're telling um, um, to Salesforce data layer that, okay, give me every damn account from the data store, and the poor Visualforce page has to handle that, which is not a great practice, right? You should restrict your data fetch operation using a where clause or other filter condition, whatever you put, right? So you have to factor that in consideration. Just please do not use so-called query, for the sake of it. You have to be responsible, to handle the large data volume, right? That's your responsibility, and you have to pay attention to that. Okay. And again, this is another thing you should understand, that Visualforce page can't exceed 15 MB, standard, uh, response limit. So you have to factor that into consideration, right? So then they talk about, if your Visualforce page need data grid, use pagination and filter, which is pretty obvious. Make data read only to reduce the view state size, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that is, just keep it in consideration. And then you have delayed expensive calculation or data loading. You should not do any kind of complex processing. So what happens is that you can do that in an asynchronous way if you wanted to deal with expensive, calculation. Or sometimes people pass that to Heroku and do their, calculation there and get the data back. I mean, it depends. There are different solutions around, based on the requirement. I'm just giving an example, right? You can always move your complicated tasks to an, asynchronous process, and then it will do whatever it's supposed to do. Okay, so that's exactly what I was talking about. Instead of synchronous process, you should try to make it as an asynchronous to see if that helps with your performance, right? And like it syncs with my the platform cache video I did at the time. When you have to use the global data, right? You can use platform cache. The cache, you have to be very careful, or you can use custom settings, right? So the data, say for instance, it doesn't change all the time. Say for instance, the currency exchange rate snapshot, so that doesn't get changed, right? So daily currency snapshot, right? So you can store that in the cache, but like I said, cache has its own size limit, so you have to factor that in consideration, right? And then, always, other option is, if you're using Apex, write your code in an efficient way. I do understand that people think that Salesforce will take care of the performance, which is a very bad attitude in my opinion. So you should work on your coding if that's something that's get involved in your Visualforce page development, right? Because I've seen a lot of bad code written out there. To be honest, no offense to anyone. I mean, people write code in a way like a spaghetti, right? You just put something there, something here, something there. It just rubbish, in my opinion. I've seen a horrible code, right, which you can't even classify as a programming construct. People. It's like saying, it's just like someone gave me this analogy a few years ago. I remember in 2009 when I was in London, I went to this opera show, right? I mean, opera. It's a pretty great show. So imagine an opera singer, right, started to blabber, blah, 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 without making any sense, right? That's pretty much, to me, a code is about. If you start writing a junk code, right, to me, sounds like that. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? So you have to respect what you're trying to do and feel, and you're obliged to write a good quality code, right? If you decided to be a programmer, it's your responsibility to write a great code. Otherwise, don't be a programmer. It's simple, right? Right. So we have the same goes to the so-called then getter methods. So then you have to worry about optimizing the view state, HTML. If you're using JavaScript, please make sure that you write efficient JavaScript, right? Yeah, and how to use the image, right? And so yeah, this is a few these are a few things you have to pay attention. This will help, like I said, if you are trying to do a performance tuning for an existing Visualforce page or building a new Visualforce page, or for that matter, right? If you're not building a Visualforce page, if you're building an LWC component, still you have to factor these things into consideration, right? Because LWC, right, you can use Apex if you don't want. You can still get away without using Apex, right? But that being said, if you wanted to perform stuff in a JavaScript, you have to make sure you write an efficient JavaScript code, right? Just don't write for the sake of it. There are JavaScript design patterns, so it's I will always encourage you guys to check that out. Design patterns will help you write better code, right? So the people who comes to you and say, "Oh, these things makes the code complicated," they are the one who don't understand how these things works, and it's an easy excuse for not to do the things in the right way, right? Just because something you can do in a shady way, in a quick and easy way, that doesn't mean it's the right way to do, right? It's you have to think from a long-term maintainability perspective, right? So if you end up in building something which is difficult to maintain, not easy to scale, you're going to cost company more money over the course of time, right? So yeah, so that's some of the things I just wanted to cover today. I hope you enjoyed it. So, in Platform Developer 2, this is very important because, once you've completed Platform Developer 2, there is an expectation you're setting up, right? You're telling to company, look, I'm expert on a development side of things, right? I mean, I'm not talking about Salesforce DX. I'm not talking about CI/CD pipeline. I'm not talking about, how to maintain a repository on an Azure or AWS or GitLab. I'm not talking any of this. I'm talking about from a core fundamental software development perspective on Salesforce side of things, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys have an amazing Wednesday. Adios.